All right, guys. So in this portion of this module, we are talking about some basic applications and approaches that we draw from behavior theory. And these are all examples of things, I'm sure, as we've gone through and reviewed them, that probably you've thought to yourself of examples, which you can think of either where you yourself have had experience with some of these approaches, or you've used them in your own life, in your own life, with your own behavior, with your grandkids, your kids, or wherever it may be. So we've talked about extinction and modeling. We've talked about shaping. Those three are just real basic core, kind of their core concepts, but they're also too really basic just behavior theory applications that we see around us in all kinds of ways. And we have one more we want to talk about, and it's called the token economy. And again, this is another one of those examples of an approach or an application that we see around us all the time. And you probably have even had maybe some experience with the token economy. It may not have been called that, but you were familiar with it. When you were in school growing up, kind of like me, you may remember that some of your teachers may have had like a star chart, or maybe as a parent or a grandparent with your kids or your grandkids, maybe you've got like a checklist or a star chart or a chore chart, and every single time your kiddos do something or they earn points or stars, you put a little star on the star chart. And usually, the idea being, I remember when I was in school, having a teacher one year who really wanted to motivate us to begin reading. This was third or fourth grade. And maybe you had a teacher like that around that age. I had a teacher who loved to read, and she wanted to inspire us to read. So we would say, from a behavior modification standpoint, she wanted to modify our behavior so that we would begin reading more. And what she would do is she would have us, she motivated us by giving us a list of books that we could read from. And if we read those books and did a real basic book report, I remember there was a big chart at the back of the room that had our names on it. And she would put these big gold stars next to our name for every book that we read. And I don't remember what it was, if it was 5 or 10, or probably was something like 5. Once you got 5 stars, well, then you got some kind of reward. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that most of us in the class, it was something that was enticing to us. And so I remember, I could still this day remember being probably a third or fourth grader, and I began to take books home and to read at night. My mom and dad were stunned. Why are you? Well, because a pizza party or ice cream party, something that the teacher had kind of promised us, that once you get a certain number of stars on your chart, well, then you get some larger kind of of a reward. I have no memory of that teacher ever using the phrase token economy, but that's what that is. A token economy is used and has been used for years. And we see them used especially in situations where we want to give immediate reinforcement on behavior. We see token economies a lot of times with kids or with clients where attention span is short. We oftentimes see token economies used like in residential programs where clients, or like a classroom where kids or clients are kind of all in one community together. If you ever worked in a residential program or a group home or a sober living facility or a psychiatric facility, a lot of times there's what's called a point and level system where there are certain behaviors that clients have to engage in. It could be, a lot of times it's like chores or attending group. And if they get a certain number of points, they get a certain number of points for each of those behaviors. And once they get a certain number, once that number rises to a certain level, they usually get some kind of privilege. And so all of that, a point and level system is an example of a token economy. Token economy, as I have in your lecture notes, has basically three main components. Number one, a token economy starts with the person who's in charge of it. We'll say like a teacher in a classroom, deciding in advance, what behavior am I looking for? What behavior do I want to promote? What behavior do I want my students to engage in? And then that behavior is communicated clearly to we'll say kids or to the clients. Token economies do not work if there's confusion. They're not effective at all if there's confusion. So it always starts with clear communication. A teacher may want to increase or decrease, for example, kids talking out of turn. And maybe she wants to increase kids raising their hand and waiting until they're called on before they give an answer. So she communicates clearly, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and we're going to review for this test we have tomorrow. And if you raise your hand and wait for me to call on you and give me the correct answer, I'm going to give you something called a token. Now, a token could be a check mark on a board. A token could be a little piece of plastic, like a little poker chip like this. It could be a gold star. It could be a point. It could be anything. A token is a a token is a neutral item that is given as an immediate reinforcer for the desired behavior. So that's the second part of a token economy. The first part is the desired behavior that I'm looking for is clearly communicated. The second is whenever that behavior is performed, we'll say kids or clients get some neutral item called a token, usually in the moment. So token economies usually work best when there's clear communication, where the token really doesn't matter. What matters is the giving of the token immediately, consistently, in as a consequence to a desired behavior. So in using our example of a classroom, a teacher wants kids to raise their hand and wait to be called on and give an appropriate answer. Well, let's say that she starts reviewing with the class. Every single time a kiddo raises their hand, waits to be called on, gives a correct answer, the teacher gives the token as a reward. If a kiddo blurts out, he or she doesn't get a token. If a kiddo raises their hand but then blurts out, they don't get a token. If a kiddo raises their hand, waits to be called on but gives an incorrect answer, they don't get a token, right? So it has to be specific. The behavior is raising your hand, waiting to be called on, giving me a correct answer, right? Then you get the token. Now here's the deal. For a token economy to be effective, the people who are receiving the tokens, who are engaging in the behavior and receiving the token, they have to know in advance that once I get 6 of these, whatever the number is, once I get 10 of these, I get to cash them in. That's where the word economy comes from. The tokens don't mean anything unless there is a larger reward I can cash the token in to get. So maybe I tell the students, once you get 10 tokens, here's the thing, you get to leave early today. Once you get 10 tokens, you get to come back here and play on the computer at the end of the day. Anyone who has 10 tokens at the end of our review, at the end of the day today, the last 30 minutes while everyone else is reading silently, you get to come back here and play on the computer for a while. Something enticing that the client that you're working with is willing to work for. So there's a larger reward that the kids know or the clients know in advance they get to cash their tokens in to get. The larger reward is called a backup reinforcer. That's an important term. A backup reinforcer is the larger reward. Now here's the thing. The backup reinforcer is going to vary from situation to situation to situation to situation because all populations are not the same. If you're working with kids in a classroom, well, you just have to decide what reward are they willing to, what privilege or reward are they willing to work for? If you're working with adults in a group home, well, what are they willing to work for? What kind of privilege would be valuable enough to them that it's going to motivate them to engage in the behavior consistently that I'm kind of looking for? Some of you are going to do your practicum, maybe like in a sober living facility or a group home or something like that. My hunch is in most group homes and most sober living facilities or most residential programs, the clients have some responsibilities. They can't just hang out all day. Hopefully, they just can't hang out all day. And in most effective programs, clients have some things that they're supposed to be doing. And usually what happens is there's some payoff though. So if I go to group every single day, if I clean my room every single day, if I help in the kitchen, whatever the rules are, usually I'm earning points. But the idea is those points are not valuable unless I know as the client, hey, at the end of the week, they're going to count my points up. And if I have 50, that means I get to go on an outing this weekend. I don't have to stay here all weekend. That means that I can have one of my relatives come and visit me or something like that. So again, the backup reinforcer is the larger reward that someone cashes their tokens in to get at some point. It could be at the end of the day, it could be at the end of the week, or whatever it may be. But the backup reinforcer has to be a reward that is at some level enticing. Okay, so let's just kind of back up a little bit. So a token economy is a system. It is an approach where a person who is kind of organizing it or running it decides in advance what appropriate behaviors they want to reward. Those behaviors are communicated clearly to the clients or to the students. When those behaviors are performed is the second step. The client is given a neutral item like a token or points or check mark or whatever it may be. And the client knows that once I get a certain number of these, I can cash them in. This is the third step. I can cash them in for a larger reward, a backup reinforcer. So it's a really, really simple way to organize behavior. It's also a simple way to motivate and to modify behavior as well too. I mentioned in your lecture notes this. My hunch is if I were to ask you, are you a part of any kind of rewards or point program? You might be at HEB or Sonic or Kroger, maybe, or somewhere, Sam's Club. Maybe you're part of a reward, maybe at a restaurant or a store. I know at my house, we are part of like the Kroger rewards program. So every time we go into Kroger, we have a little rewards card. And if we buy groceries, we swipe that card. And guess what Kroger gives us based on how much money we spend? They give us points. And once we earn enough points, well, then we get free stuff, right? So once we earn like 100 points, we get a coupon for buy one, get one free milk or something like that. Well, that is an example of a token economy. Kroger is motivating me to come and buy groceries from them, and they're rewarding my behavior by giving me a token. In this case, it's points. And the reason why the points are valuable to me is I know that if I keep getting points, I'm going to get some money off of the next tank of gas I buy from them, or I'm going to get some money off of the next gallon of milk I buy from them. Maybe your favorite store that you go to, where you buy your clothes, for example. I'm thinking of like Old Navy for an example. I'm thinking Old Navy. I'm thinking of other stores that are out there that I'm familiar with because I've been in them recently where I was asked, hey, do you want to sign up for our rewards program? Restaurants, fast food places have all kinds of rewards programs. All of those are examples, they don't call them that, but they're all examples of token economies because there's the idea where there's a behavior that is hoping to be modified. The behavior is buying stuff from us. The more money you spend, the more points you get. So that is intentional, right? So like Kroger, for example, I get more points if I buy $100 worth of groceries as opposed to $40 worth, and that's intentional. They want me to spend more money because that way I get more points. And maybe they're hoping that I'll be motivated to come back and keep spending money with them to buy more groceries from them. Because in the end, there's going to be a backup reinforcer. There's going to be a larger reward down the road of free stuff or half a tank of gas free or buy one, get one free on milk or something like that. So all of those are examples of token economy. So many of us have had experiences with those as well too. So real simple, but again, sort of like all the others that we've talked about, extinction, modeling, shaping especially, and token economies, all of them kind of they kind of use these core ideas we've talked about before. The idea of reinforcement, the idea of consequences, the idea of engaging in behavior, and the fact that our behavior results in consequences, but that the consequences that we experience often influences what we do next. All of those core ideas are kind of interwoven into these four core ideas that I want you to think about. Go into the textbook, look in the textbook definitions, look at the lecture notes, look at the PowerPoint presentation, look at the videos and handouts I posted for you this week to just get a good little basic handle on all of them. Token economies, shaping, modeling, and extinction. Come back the next module where we're going to look at four more. We're going to look at relaxation training, flooding, in vivo desensitization, and systematic desensitization. We're going to look at four more in the next module, so we have 8 total for our next exam to be kind of familiar with. Real simple, basic ideas when it comes to ways in which we see behavior theory at play in the real world on all kinds of levels. So I'll see you next time.